Shalom from Radat Yeshua Masonic Synagogue here in Norwich. And again, greetings to you. It's the third day of our Omer count this year, and once more, some more thoughts and ideas, really from me, just to chew things around a little bit, to get us thinking about little things and to really engage our brains a little bit during this Omer count, rather than just merely counting day by day, that we can actually engage with the scriptures and engage with a little bit of thinking with it too. And one of the things that occurred to me not that long ago when I was thinking about this and pondering about who God is, something really quite interesting came through my mind. I want to read something to you. First of all, the one statement and declaration that as Jews we all know so well: Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. God is one. We know He is one. Maimonides said unique, but let's just focus on His unity. The fact that God is one, there is only one God, is really the bedrock of all Jewish thinking and expectation, that we know who He is. That thought is echoed, of course, all the way through the Messianic writings as well. We don't ever read anywhere in the Messianic writings that there is any more than one God. I want to give you one example of this. This comes from the letter that Rav Shaul wrote to the Jewish community in Ephesus, and it's chapter 4. And he says this: there is one body, one Spirit, just as you were called in one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one immersion, one mikvah, one God, and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in you all. It's a wonderful declaration of Shaul. It's a declaration of faith with the uniqueness and unity of who God is that's carried through into Messianic Judaism. We believe that God is one, that there is only one God. Nowhere in the Messianic writings do we ever read a declaration or theology stating there are three gods. That's patently not true. We believe that God is one. But it's an interesting one when we think about this. And I was chewing this over a couple of weeks ago and thinking, it's weird, isn't it, that in the Tanakh we regularly meet God the Father. He's involved in, he's the creator God. God the Father is there all the way behind. He's identifying himself as a father to us, who God is. And yet, we don't have to go very far in the Tanakh, do we? In Bereshit, and we read that the Spirit of God hovered on the waters. And I was just pondering this, thinking, well, how is it that God the Father is the creator, but his Spirit is hovering on the waters? It's like temporally and physically in a very different space and place, that God is still filling the universe, and yet his Spirit is quite clearly there at that point. And it just struck me as I was thinking about this, how the Ruach and the mentions of the Spirit of God all the way through the Tanakh and through the Torah, no one, I haven't come across anyone within Judaism, within Jewish thinking and commentaries and else, no one at that point is suggesting that God the Father and God the Spirit are two different gods. It's just not a thing. No one mentions it, no one says this is a thing, no one develops a theology on it. The closest, I suppose, we would get, I would guess, to be a time you get to the end of the 1st century, early 2nd century, and you get the discussion, of course, you'll know, around Rabbi Akiva and on that particular time period, and the rabbinic discussion about two powers in heaven, which, of course, we have related to us as a kind of a heresy that was suggested at that time period. Possibly actually connecting with Messianic Judaism at that time, that was maybe one of the accusations that was being thrown at Messianic Jews. It is all possible, of course, difficult to prove with the evidence that we have at this time scale and separation. But nevertheless, even before that time, there's no discussion that is God two then? Is he God the Father and God the Spirit? And traditional Judaism, ancient Judaism, has never had a problem in understanding that God the Father and God the Spirit, his Spirit is still 100% God the Father. They're not separate, they're not different entities, they're not counted as two. Both of them are counted as one, completely within the traditional Jewish view of thinking and Jewish understanding. And yet, then we get to the 1st century, and Yeshua Mashiachenu, the Mashiach, is born. He is God incarnate. He lives amongst us, fully 100% God. And yet the cry then rises within other forms of Judaism, no, this cannot be true because God is one. This is creating more than one God, and yet his Spirit has been with us all the way through the Tanakh, and not a whisper of understanding that there may be then two gods, God the Father and God the Spirit. And yet, lo and behold, suddenly the charge is being laid that now you're talking three, surely undermining ancient Jewish thinking where no one counted two in the Tanakh, and yet lo and behold, suddenly the charge and accusation is put against us that we're now counting three. It's clearly nonsense. In fact, Yeshua himself says this. He says, it's recorded for us, I and the Father are one. Just as much as the Ruach, the Spirit of God, is one with Father. There's no divisions there. There's no, hiving one off the other. They are utterly united. God is one. And yet, for some reason, our people seem to struggle with the idea that God is our salvation, and his salvation as a core entity of who God is somehow in Yeshua separated from who God is. It cannot be. God is salvation. And that salvation is revealed to us through Yeshua Mashiachenu. There is no separation. No hiving off into something separate or different or counted differently. His salvation is redeemed, is revealed to us through Yeshua at that point in time. That's who he is. He's revealing that aspect to us, and it's not a separate thing in any way, shape, or form. I want to just leave you with that to think about that a little bit, because I think it's fascinating that often the charges and accusations which are brought against us as Messianic Jews simply do not add up, even within ancient Judaism, ancient Jewish thinking and practice, and actually even with rabbinic Jewish thinking and practice. No one within rabbinic Judaism counts the Spirit of God as a separate God away from God the Father, and yet the two are listed and revealed separately through the scriptures, different roles or functions, however you want to classify it that way, and yet no one says there are two. There is only one. The scriptures are absolutely clear. Adonai Echad, God is one. He is one. He will always be one. Amen.